Dr. Lee Hyojin had been working underground for so long that she had almost forgotten what sunlight looked like. The laboratory where she spent her days was buried 3 miles beneath the surface of the earth, in a place that did not appear on any map. The air was always cool and dry, and the only sounds were the humming of machines and the quiet voices of scientists who had dedicated their lives to a secret that could change everything. The laboratory was bigger than most cities, with tunnels and rooms that stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of people worked there, but none of them were allowed to tell their families what they did for work. As far as the world above knew, they were all employed by boring companies that made computer parts or medical equipment. Hyojin was looking at a holographic display that showed the inside of an alien weapon when the red lights began flashing. The lights had been installed 15 years ago, but no one had ever seen them work before. Today, they painted everything in the laboratory the color of blood. All personnel report to stations immediately, a voice said from speakers in the ceiling. This is not a drill protocol. Omega is now active. Hyojin felt her heart start beating faster. She had known this day might come, but she had hoped it never would. Protocol Omega meant that something terrible had happened to humanity. Somewhere among the stars, it meant that all the work she had been doing in secret was about to be put to the test. She ran through the corridors toward the main control room, passing hundreds of other scientists and engineers who were all moving with the same urgent purpose. The control room was a vast space filled with screens and computers that showed more information than any one person could understand. Han Dongmin was already at his station when Hyojin arrived. His fingers were flying over his keyboard as he brought online systems that had been sleeping for years. The screens around him showed spacecraft designs, weapon schematics, and battle plans that looked like something from a science fiction movie. What happened? Hyojin asked as she took her place at the central console. Ambassador Taeho is dead, Dongmin said without looking up from his work. The Galactic Council executed him and declared that humanity will be contained within our current territory. They think we are too dangerous to be allowed to expand. Hyojin placed her hand on a scanner that read her palm print and DNA at the same time. When the machine was satisfied with her identity, it unlocked controls that had been waiting for this moment. The screens around her came alive with data that showed just how much the aliens had underestimated humanity for 15 years. While the Galactic Council thought humans were still struggling to build simple spaceships, teams of scientists had been taking apart every piece of alien technology they could find. Every trade agreement, every cultural exchange, every peaceful meeting had been an opportunity to steal and study the advanced equipment that the aliens used. The energy weapons that had killed Taeho were based on technology that humans had not only copied but improved. The shields that protected alien ships used principles that human engineers had figured out how to bypass. The faster-than-light drives that let aliens travel between stars were primitive compared to what humanity had built in secret. Hyojin looked at a display that showed the current positions of every alien military ship in the galaxy. The information came from spy satellites that the aliens did not know existed, and from computer viruses that had been planted in alien communication networks years ago. The Galactic Council thought their movements were secret, but humans had been watching every ship and listening to every message. Bring up the fleet status. Hyojin ordered a min. Pressed several buttons and the main screen showed something that would have shocked any alien who saw it. Hidden in asteroid fields and behind the moons of distant planets were over 300 human warships that had been built over the past decade. Each ship was smaller than the massive vessels that the aliens preferred, but they were faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything the Galactic Council had ever seen. The aliens built their ships to look impressive with bright lights, decorative panels, and huge size that was meant to frighten their enemies. Human ships were built for only one purpose: to win battles. They were dark and sleek, with no wasted space, and weapons that could fire faster than alien sensors could track. Dr. Park Seo Jun ran into the control room carrying a tablet computer that showed test results from the weapons laboratory. We just finished the final tests on the plasma cannons, he said, breathing hard from running. The power output is 30% higher than alien shields can. Hando Hyojin smiled for the first time since the red lights had started flashing. The plasma cannons were weapons that used alien technology as a starting point but pushed it far beyond what the Original creators had thought possible human scientists had not been content to simply copy what the aliens had built. They had made it better. Captain Choi Seung-min stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Retaliation, watching his crew prepare for launch. The ship was hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid on the far side of the moon where no alien scanner had ever detected it. For 5 years it had been waiting for this moment when it would finally leave its hiding place and show the galaxy what humans were capable of. The Retaliation looked nothing like the ships that aliens built. Instead of being large and bulky, it was shaped like a knife blade designed to cut through space at speeds that would make alien pilots sick. Its hull was made from materials that absorbed sensor beams instead of reflecting them, making it almost invisible to alien detection systems. Sir, we are receiving launch orders from Earth Command. Lieutenant Nam Subin reported from her station. Her voice was steady, but Seung-min could see the excitement in her eyes. All fleet units are being activated around the solar system. Other ships were powering up their engines for the first time. Some were hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Others had been disguised as mining stations or research facilities. All of them had been waiting for the signal that would tell them their time of hiding was over. The alien races of the Galactic Council had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that humans were like themselves, old and comfortable and unwilling to take risks. They thought that 3 years of peaceful contact had shown them everything they needed to know about humanity. What they did not understand was that humans had spent their entire history fighting wars against each other. They knew how to build weapons that could destroy cities and how to create strategies that could defeat enemies with superior numbers. They understood that sometimes the only way to achieve peace was to be better at war than anyone else. Lieutenant Yoon Jin-ho sat at the navigation station plotting a course that would take the Retaliation to its first target. The alien monitoring station at Kepler 442 had been watching human space for 3 years, making sure that no human ships traveled beyond their assigned boundaries. Today, that station would learn what happened when humans decided that boundaries were just suggestions. Captain Seung-min looked around at his crew of 300 people who had volunteered for a mission that none of them expected to survive. They were not fighting for territory or resources or revenge. They were fighting for the simple idea that no alien council had the right to execute human ambassadors and cage humanity within a few star systems. Take us out, Lieutenant Yoon Seung-min ordered. The Retaliation lifted silently from its hiding place and began accelerating toward the edge of the solar system. Behind it, other ships were emerging from their own hiding places as humanity prepared to show the Galactic Council what happened when they underestimated the species that had conquered their own world through nothing but determination and the willingness to never give up. The massive hall was quiet as Ambassador Kim Tae-ho walked through its center. His feet made soft sounds on the smooth metal floor that stretched out like a silver lake. The ceiling above him rose so high that he could barely see the top, where thousands of lights twinkled like stars. Each light represented one of the alien worlds that belonged to the Galactic Council. Tae-ho had been to this place many times before, but never like this. Today his hands were locked behind his back with glowing metal rings that buzzed with strange energy. The rings were heavy and cold against his wrists. They reminded him that he was no longer an ambassador. He was a prisoner. Around the Great Hall, 47 different alien beings sat on floating chairs that moved without sound. Some of the aliens looked almost human, but with skin that was blue or green or silver. Others had too many arms or legs or eyes that glowed in the dark. A few were so strange that Tae-ho could not tell which end was there. Head at the front of the hall on the highest floating chair sat Counselor Vex Prime. His blue skin was covered in small scales that caught the light like tiny mirrors. His forearms moved as he spoke, and his voice filled the entire hall through speakers hidden in the walls. We are here today to judge the human called Kim Tae-ho. Vex Prime said. His words were translated into Tae-ho-zia language by a small device in his ear. You represent a species that has broken our most sacred laws. Tae-ho kept his back straight and his head high. Even though he knew what was coming, he had known this day would arrive from the moment Earth made contact with the first alien ship 3 years ago. The humans had been excited to learn they were not alone in the universe, but the aliens had not shared that excitement. What laws have we broken? Tae-ho asked. His voice was calm and steady, even though his heart was beating fast inside his chest. "You have spread too far too fast," Vex Prime replied. Another alien counselor made a sound like angry birds. The insect-like being had 6 legs and wings that buzzed when it was upset. "Your species has built colonies on 17 different worlds in just 3 years. We followed the same rules that all other species follow." Tejo said, "We did not attack anyone, we did not steal anything, we simply built homes for our people on empty worlds. That is the problem," hissed the insect alien. Its voice sounded like wind blowing through broken glass. "Humans multiply too quickly, you build too fast, you ask too many questions. The galaxy was peaceful before you came." Tejo looked around the hall at all the alien faces staring at him. Some looked angry, others looked afraid, a few seemed sad, but none of them looked like they would help him. He realized that the trial was just for show. The decision had already been made. The council has ruled on many species before us. Tejo said, trying one last time to make them understand. "Why are we different from the others?" "Because the others knew their place," Vex Prime said, standing up from his floating chair. His forearms spread wide, like he was trying to embrace the whole galaxy. "The Korthans took 50 years to colonize 5 worlds. The Zentari took 100 years to build their first space station. You humans have done more in 3 years than most species do in a century." The other aliens began making sounds of agreement. Some clapped with hands that had too many fingers, others made musical noises that sounded like whale songs. Tejo understood that they were all afraid of what humans might become if they were allowed to continue growing. "We are not your enemy," Tejo said, but his words seemed to disappear into the huge hall without making any difference. The vote was taken quickly. Each alien counselor pressed a button on their floating chair. Red lights meant guilty, green lights meant innocent. Tejo watched as red light after red light appeared around the hall, 46 red lights and only 1 green light that represented humanity itself. "The judgment is final," Vex Prime announced. "Kim Tejo, you are guilty of crimes against the natural order of the galaxy. The punishment is death. Your species will be contained within your current territory. Any attempt to expand further will result in the complete destruction of all human colonists." Tejo closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He thought about his wife Min Seo back on Earth and their 2 children who were probably playing in their garden. Right now, he thought about all the humans living on the 17 colony worlds who were building new lives among the stars. They deserved better than this. Just before the energy beam hit him, Tejo pressed a small button hidden in his collar with his chin. The button activated a recording device that had been built into his body before he left Earth. Everything that happened in the council hall had been recorded and transmitted back to Earth through a quantum communication link that the aliens did not know existed. The beam of light struck Tejo in the chest and he fell to the floor without making a sound. His last thought was that his death would not be meaningless. It would be the beginning of something that the Galactic Council could never have imagined on Earth. President Park Min-jun sat in his office deep underground beneath the Pacific Ocean. The office was part of a huge complex that had been built in secret over the past 10 years while the aliens thought humans were still learning how to travel between stars. The truth was very different. Park Min-jun was a tall man with gray hair and serious eyes. He had been expecting this message, but it still made him angry when it arrived. The quantum transmitter on his desk began glowing, and soon Tejo's voice filled the room, describing everything that had happened in the council hall. The recording lasted for 2 hours. Park Min-jun listened to every word. 3 times he heard the aliens talking about humans like they were dangerous animals that needed to be caged. He heard them vote for Tejo's death without even trying to understand humanity's side of the story. When the recording ended, Park Min-jun sat quietly for a long time thinking about what had to happen next. Deep beneath his feet, in levels of the complex that were so secret that most of the workers did not know they existed, machines that had been waiting for 15 years began to wake up. Park Min-jun walked to a wall that looked like solid metal but opened when he approached a scanner, read his handprint, his eye pattern, and his heartbeat. When the scanner was satisfied, a new room was revealed behind the wall. In the center of the room stood a single black pillar with a hand-shaped depression in its top. Park Min-jun had hoped he would never have to touch this pillar, but the aliens had made the choice for him. He placed his hand on the cold metal and felt it reading every cell in his palm. Authorization confirmed. A computer voice said Protocol Omega is now active far above him. Sirens began to sound in military bases around the world. Soldiers who had been training for this moment their entire lives ran to their station's ships that had been hidden on the dark side of the moon, powered up their engines. For the first time, scientists who had been working on secret projects for decades finally learned what their work was really. Fourth Galactic Council thought they had solved their human problem by killing one ambassador. They were about to learn that killing a human was very different from defeating humanity. Kim Tae-Hosea death would be remembered as the moment when Earth declared war on the galaxy itself. Commander Gorth had been stationed at the Kepler 442 monitoring post for 2 years, and he was bored out of his mind. The station was a massive structure that floated in empty space between two dead planets. Its job was to watch the edge of human territory and make sure no human ships tried to leave their assigned area. Gorth was a member of the Aquarian race with green skin that was always wet and gills that opened and closed on the sides of his neck. He breathed both air and water, which made him useful for working on space stations where the atmosphere was carefully controlled. His people had joined the Galactic Council 300 years ago and had been loyal members ever since. The monitoring station had enough firepower to destroy a small fleet, but Gorth had never had to use any of it. Humans were supposed to be primitive, and their ships were slow and weak. The most exciting thing that had happened in 2 years was when a human cargo ship had gotten lost and accidentally crossed into Council space. The ship had turned around and gone home as soon as Gorth contacted them. Today started like any other day. Gorth was in the command center reading reports about asteroid movements and solar radiation when his sensor operator, Lieutenant Visk, made a sound like a surprised bird. Sir, I am detecting an unknown ship approaching our position, Visk said. His 6 eyes were all focused on his screen, and his tentacles were moving quickly over his controls. The ship is moving at impossible speed. Gorth walked over to look at the sensor display. What he saw there made no sense. The screen showed a ship that was much smaller than anything the Council used, but it was traveling faster than most Council ships could manage, even with their engines at maximum power. Open a communication channel. Gorth ordered. This is Galactic Council Monitoring Station 742. Identify yourself immediately. The response came not in words, but in the form of bright energy beams that struck the station's shields. The entire structure shook and alarms began sounding throughout all the levels. Gorth grabbed onto his command chair to keep from falling as the lights flickered and went dim. The human ship had opened fire without any warning. It was moving so fast that by the time Gorth's weapons tried to target it, the ship had already moved to a new position. The station's massive plasma cannons were powerful enough to destroy a planet, but they took too long to aim and fire. Return fire, Gorth shouted, but his weapons officer was already trying. The Council guns turned slowly toward where the human ship had been, but found only empty space. The human vessel had moved again, firing from a completely different angle. Captain Choi Sung-min stood on the bridge of the Retaliation, watching the alien station try desperately to fight back. The station was huge and impressive, but it had been built by people who had forgotten how real battles worked. Its weapons were too slow, its shields were too weak, and its crew was too surprised to mount an effective defense target. Their communication array. Sung-min ordered Major Kang Ji-won at the weapons station. His ship fired a precise beam that destroyed the station's ability to call for help. Now the aliens could not warn the rest of the Council about what was happening. The battle lasted only 10 minutes. The alien station had been designed to intimidate, not to fight. Human weapons tore through its shields like they were made of paper. The station's return fire was so slow that Sung-min had time to move his ship, order coffee, and plan his next 3 attacks before the alien beams reached where he had been. When the station finally stopped shooting back, Sung-min knew it was disabled, not destroyed. That was important for what came next. He needed prisoners and information, not just another pile of space debris. Prepare boarding parties, he ordered. We are going to take that station intact. 20 minutes later, human soldiers in powered armor were cutting through the station's airlocks. The aliens inside had never seen anything like them. The armor made the humans look like metal giants, and their weapons fired energy beams that could cut through solid steel. The station crew of 43 aliens surrendered without putting up any real fight. Commander Gorth found himself face to face with Captain Sung-min in the station's command center. The human was smaller than Gorth had expected, but there was something in his eyes that made the alien commander very nervous. "How is this possible?" Gorth asked through his translation device. "Your species is supposed to be primitive. You barely have space travel." Sung-min smiled, but it was not a friendly expression. "Your council made several mistakes," he said. "The first mistake was thinking that 3 years of peaceful contact showed you everything about humanity. The second mistake was executing our ambassador. The third mistake was declaring war on a species that has never lost one." While the human soldiers secured the station and took the alien crew prisoner, Major Kang Jo-won was downloading everything from the station's computer systems. The information they found was more valuable than any weapon the aliens had. Detailed records of every council ship position, military base, and supply route back on Earth. President Park Min-jun received the battle report with satisfaction. Phase 1 had been a complete success. Not only had the humans won their first battle against the council, but they had done it so easily that it proved everything their scientists had calculated. The aliens were much weaker than they appeared. The captured alien database showed that the Galactic Council was held together more by fear and habit than by actual strength. Their ships were old, their tactics were predictable, and their crews had not fought a real battle in over 200 years. They had grown soft and comfortable while humans had spent every day of their existence learning how to fight. Begin Phase 2. Park Min-jun ordered across human space. Hidden shipyards that had been working in secret for 10 years finally revealed what they had been building. Asteroid mining facilities that were actually weapons factories powered up their production lines. Space stations that pretended to be research centers opened their docking bays to reveal fleets of warships. The humans had built their military in the shadows while the aliens watched them through official channels. Every trade mission had been cover for intelligence gathering. Every cultural exchange had been an opportunity to plant spies and steal technology. Every peaceful gesture had been preparation for the war that everyone knew would eventually come. Admiral Go Yun-ji took command of the growing human fleet from her flagship, the Defiance. Unlike the aliens who built their ships to look impressive, humans had designed their vessels for only one purpose: winning battles. The Defiance was dark and angular, with no wasted space and enough firepower to destroy anything the Council could send against it. The first phase of the war was over and humanity had won every engagement. The aliens were starting to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. When they executed Ambassador Kim Tae-ho instead of solving their human problem, they had awakened something that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Commander Gorth and his crew were taken to a human prison ship where they would spend the rest of the war. As his cell door closed behind him, Gorth finally understood what his people and the rest of the Council had done. They had declared war on a species that was better at war than anyone else in the galaxy. The humans were not primitive, they were predators, and now they were hunting. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most chaotic meeting in the organization's 1,000-year history. Representatives from 47 different species were all talking at once, their voices creating a noise that sounded like a zoo full of angry animals. Some were shouting in languages that the translation computers could not keep up with. Others were making sounds that were not words at all, but expressions of pure panic. Council leader Vex Prime stood at the center of the Great Hall trying to restore order, but no one was listening to him anymore. In the past week, 16 Council monitoring stations had been attacked and destroyed by human forces. 3 supply convoys carrying food and medicine to outer colonies had been captured. 7 communication relays that connected distant parts of Council space had gone silent. The humans were not fighting like any enemy the Council had ever faced before. Most species that went to war with the Council would mass their fleets and attack major targets like military bases or important planets. The humans were doing something completely different. They were attacking the systems that held the Council together. Representative Clix of the Mantarian Hive clicked her mandibles nervously as she addressed the assembly. "The humans seem to know exactly where our weak points are," she said, her insect voice carrying clearly through the translation system. "They strike fast and disappear before our response fleets arrive. Our patrol routes, our supply schedules, our communication protocols, they know everything. How Is that possible? Demanded Representative Thorgak, whose stone-like skin was turning red with anger. We have never shared that information with humans. What the Council did not know was that humanity had been gathering intelligence for 3 years, through methods that the aliens could not have imagined. Every piece of technology that humans had received through trade agreements had been secretly modified. Before being sent back, every cultural exchange student had been trained to observe and remember everything they saw. Every peaceful diplomatic meeting had been an opportunity to plant listening devices and computer viruses. The humans had been preparing for this war since the day they made first contact with alien life. While the Council representatives had been giving speeches about peace and cooperation, human spies had been mapping every military installation and recording every conversation. That seemed important. Admiral Go Yunji commanded the human fleet from the bridge of her flagship, the Defiance, which was currently hiding in the shadow of a gas giant in an uninhabited star system. Around her, 30 other human ships waited silently for their next target. The fleet had grown larger as more vessels arrived from Earth and the colonies, but it was still tiny compared to the thousands of ships that the Council could theoretically deploy. The difference was that the Council ships were spread across hundreds of star systems, protecting thousands of worlds, while the human fleet was concentrated and could strike anywhere in Council space before the aliens could respond. Every human ship was faster and more maneuverable than anything the aliens had, and their weapons could penetrate alien shields that had not been upgraded in centuries. Admiral, we are receiving intelligence reports from our captured data. Commander Bei Wu Jin reported from his station. Council supply Fleet 7 is moving through the Proxima corridor with minimal escort. They are carrying enough food and medical supplies to support 3 colony worlds. Sunji studied the tactical display that showed the positions of alien ships throughout the galaxy. Fleet 7 consisted of 12 massive cargo vessels protected by only 4 patrol ships. The Council clearly did not expect humans to be able to operate so deep in their territory. Set course for intercept, she ordered. We will hit them at the Proxima 4 checkpoint. The human fleet moved through space like a pack of wolves hunting prey. They used no lights that could be detected by alien sensors, and their engines ran so quietly that Council listening posts could not hear them coming. The aliens had grown comfortable with centuries of peace and had forgotten that space could be a dangerous place. The attack on Supply Fleet 7 was over before the alien escort ships even realized they were under fire. Human destroyers emerged from behind Proxima 4 largest moon, moving at speeds that made alien targeting computers useless. The Council patrol ships were designed more for ceremony than combat, and they lasted less than 3 minutes against human weapons. Captain Yang Minho led the boarding teams onto the captured cargo ships. What they found inside shocked even the experienced soldiers. The alien vessels were built like luxury cruise ships with individual quarters that were larger than most human homes, and recreational facilities that included swimming pools, art galleries, and concert halls. No wonder they are so weak, muttered Sergeant Ru Haijin as she secured one of the ship's bridges. These aliens have forgotten what hardship feels like. The captured supplies were immediately redistributed to human colonies that the Council had been trying to starve into submission. But more importantly, the cargo ships contained detailed maps of Council territory, including the locations of major industrial centers and the routes of other supply fleets. Within days, human raiders had struck 43 more supply convoys and destroyed 7 major distribution centers. Council worlds that had never experienced shortages were suddenly facing food rationing and power blackouts. The comfortable life that Council citizens had enjoyed for centuries was coming to an end. On the Council world of Zantara, Prime citizens stood in long lines waiting for their daily ration of synthetic food. The planet had not produced its own food in over 100 years, instead relying on supplies shipped in from agricultural worlds. Now those supply ships were being captured by human pirates, who seemed to appear out of nowhere. Council Representative Vex Prime tried to address his people's concerns through public broadcasts, but his words sounded hollow even to himself. We are dealing with a temporary disruption, he said while standing in his private bunker. Deep beneath the planet's surface, our military forces will soon restore order to our territory. What Vex Prime did not say was that the Council military was falling apart. Captains who had spent their careers on routine patrols, were panicking when faced with actual combat. Many council ships had surrendered. Without firing a shot when confronted by human vessels, some alien crews had mutinied against their officers rather than face the humans in battle. Species that made up the Galactic Council were beginning to blame each other for the disaster. The Aquarians claimed that the Mantarians had provided the Council with faulty intelligence. The Mantarians accused the Zentari of being too weak to fight properly. The Zentari pointed out that the whole war had started because the other species had insisted on executing the human ambassador 20. 3 of the 47 council species had already begun secret negotiations with human representatives. They wanted to surrender individually rather than continue a war that seemed impossible to win. The remaining 24 species were too proud or too afraid to admit defeat, but they were running out of options. President Park Min-jin reviewed the daily battle reports from his office beneath the Pacific Ocean. Every day brought news of new victories and captured territory. The extermination protocol was working better than anyone had dared to hope. The aliens had expected to fight a desperate enemy. Instead, they were facing a superior force that understood warfare better than they did. The council had made their choice when they executed Ambassador Kim Tae-ho. Now they were learning that some choices could not be undone. The humans were not fighting for territory or resources. They were fighting to prove that no alien government had the right to murder human representatives and cage humanity within a few star systems. The war was far from over, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Galactic Council was dissolving under the pressure of human attacks, and it would only be a matter of time before the remaining alien governments were forced to surrender. The species that had thought themselves superior to humanity were learning that pride and arrogance were poor substitutes for actual strength. 6 months after the execution of Ambassador Kim Tae-ho, the Galactic Council was nothing more than a shadow of its former self. The Great Hall, where representatives from 47 species had once gathered to make decisions that affected the entire galaxy, was now almost empty. Only 24 species remained loyal to the Council, and even they were beginning to question whether continuing the war was worth the cost. Council leader Vex Prime sat alone in his private quarters aboard the Council flagship Eternal Harmony, staring out at the stars through a reinforced window. The ship was one of the last 5 remaining vessels in what had once been a fleet of 500. The humans had proven to be unlike any enemy the Council had ever faced. They did not fight for conquest or resources. They fought with the single-minded determination of a species that would never accept being caged. The human blockade around the Council home system had been in place for 2 months, cutting off all supply lines and trapping the remaining government ships in orbit around the capital world. But instead of launching a final assault, the humans simply waited. They broadcast the same message every day on all frequencies, a message that Vex Prime had memorized word for word. This is Admiral Go Young-ji of the Earth Defense Force. The message always began: surrender unconditionally and your people will live. Continue to resist and face complete extinction. You have 24 hours to decide every day for 60 days. Vex Prime had ignored the message, hoping that somehow the situation would change. But nothing changed except that more Council worlds surrendered to human forces and more alien species withdrew from the alliance that was supposed to protect them. Admiral Go Young-ji stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiance, looking out at the alien ships that drifted helplessly in the space above the Council capital world. Her fleet had grown to over 200 vessels as ships arrived from Earth and the human colonies. The war was effectively over, but she was waiting for the official surrender that would make it final. The humans had won through superior planning, better technology, and most importantly, a unity of purpose that the aliens could not match. While the Council species had spent the war blaming each other for their failures, humanity had remained focused on their single goal, making sure that no alien government would ever again believe it could execute human representatives without consequences. Admiral Captain Kim So-min reported from her communications station, "We are receiving a transmission from the Council flagship. Vex Prime wants to negotiate terms." Sun-ji had been expecting this message for weeks. "Tell him there are no terms to negotiate," she replied. "The Council will dissolve immediately. All species will be free to govern themselves, and any future attacks on human territory or citizens will result in total war if he does not accept these conditions. In 1 hour we begin bombardment of the capital world. The transmission was sent to the alien flagship, and Unji began counting down the minutes. She did not want to destroy the council capital with its billions of innocent civilians. But she would do it if necessary. The aliens needed to understand that humanity was completely serious about ending this war on their own terms aboard the Eternal Harmony. Vex Prime stared at the human admiral's image on his communication screen. He could see in her eyes the same determination that had driven her species to cross the galaxy and challenge an empire that had ruled for 1,000 years. The humans were not bluffing. They would destroy the capital world and everyone on it if the council did not surrender. Vex Prime thought about his own people on the world below. Most of them had never seen a human and did not understand why their government had chosen to go to war with such a distant species. They had lived their entire lives in peace and comfort, never imagining that their leaders' decisions could bring death to their doorstep. He also thought about the other species that had already made peace with humanity. The Aquarians had signed a non-aggression treaty and were already trading with human colonies. The Mantarians had agreed to share their advanced medical technology in exchange for protection from other threats. Even some of his own species on distant worlds had begun negotiating with human representatives. The hour passed quickly, and Vex Prime found himself facing the most important decision in his people's history. He could continue fighting a war that could not be won and watch his civilization be destroyed, or he could admit defeat and hope that the humans would be merciful in victory. With 5 minutes remaining before the human deadline, Vex Prime activated his communication system and broadcast a message on all frequencies. "This is Council Leader Vex Prime of the Galactic Council," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. "I hereby announce the unconditional surrender of all Council forces and the immediate dissolution of the Galactic Council. All member species are free to negotiate their own agreements with human representatives." The response from Admiral Yunji came immediately. "Your surrender is accepted," she said. "All Council military vessels will power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded by human inspection teams. Any ship that attempts to flee or resist will be destroyed within hours." The 1,000-year empire that had ruled the galaxy was officially dead. 47 species that had once thought themselves superior to humanity learned that execution of ambassadors was an act of war, and war was something that humans were very, very good at. On Earth, President Park Min-jun addressed his people from the same office where he had authorized the extermination protocol 6 months earlier. Behind him, through reinforced windows, the lights of the underground complex stretched away into the distance like a city built for giants. "My fellow humans," he began, "today marks the end of the Galactic Council and the beginning of a new age among the stars. We fought this war not for conquest, but for the simple principle that no government has the right to murder our representatives and cage our species within artificial boundaries. The sacrifice of Ambassador Kim Tae-ho was not in vain. His death showed the galaxy that humanity will never accept being treated as inferior to any other species. We have proven that we belong among the stars, not as subjects or supplicants, but as equals." The former council species were free to govern themselves as they chose, but they would do so knowing that humanity was watching. Any species that chose aggression over cooperation would face the same fate as the Galactic Council. Any government that threatened human citizens or colonies would discover that Earth had a very long memory and a very powerful military. In the months that followed the end of the war, most alien species chose to establish peaceful relationships with humanity. They had learned that humans were generous allies but terrible enemies. The galaxy was large enough for everyone, but it would never again be used as a prison for any species that dreamed of reaching beyond their home world. Ambassador Kim Tae-ho had died believing that his sacrifice would make a difference. He had been right. His execution had triggered a war that changed everything and established humanity as the dominant force in a galaxy that had forgotten what real strength looked like. The Galactic Council was dead, and in its place stood something new, a collection of free species united not by fear but by the understanding that the universe belonged to everyone brave enough to explore it.